afternoon, everyone. Live from Silicon Valley, California. This is Success Sadhana. My name is JM, and I welcome you all to a program today where we'll continue our series on lessons from the Golden Monk. Today, we'll discuss Find Your Flow. The speaker, Vaish, a veteran Bhakti yogi, author, and former monk. We have 15 members on Zoom and 10 members on Facebook. I have Shweka helping me out in managing social media today. Good afternoon, Vaish. Welcome back to another episode of Success Sadhana.
Thanks so much, JM. I'm really happy to be back here. It's a very productive space because when there is an exchange of thoughts between those who are focused on improving themselves on all levels of life, then there's a kind of combustion that takes place. And there are inevitably not just ideas, but feelings we take away with us, feelings that embolden us to go forward despite the fact that there are obstacles created by our own minds. And that's the most valuable asset we can have, is that determination to move forward, the kind of courage it takes, actually takes guts to make progress in life, because there is a natural force of resistance that we have to work against. This is something that comes up in the Bhagavad Gita when Krishna talks about how the mind can be our best friend or our worst enemy. And there is an expectation in the Bhagavad Gita and the other wisdom literatures, the Upanishads, what to speak of in any bona fide discipline where someone's trying to make advancement, is we have to take some responsibility. Although we're given the apparatus, the human body through which we can make progress, we as spiritual conscious beings, we still have to exercise our free will and use it. And that's not always so easy, is it? There's a favorite book of mine called The War of Art. I know, it's usually called The Art of War. But Stephen Pressfield, who's an excellent author, had written the book. As a writer, he observed how in any creative process, there's a way in which there's resistance, which he spells with a capital R. And he cites examples of people who had been artists, but then who had diverted themselves just to avoid the creative process. I think one of the most profound examples was Hitler, because although he was a painter, Stephen Pressfield, maybe partly tongue-in-cheek, says that he had gone out of his way to start wars and do so many other things just to avoid the creative process. So be that as it may, there's optimism built into the wisdom literatures. Recently, I had to visit a physical therapist, and in his office, he had a little jar, and it said "Jar of Optimism." And he did give me something out of that jar. And so hopefully that's what we'll get from today, is the optimism that's passed down to us through not just the ancient teachings, which are a way that we can keep our determination going by hearing a voice from these ancient texts that are so commonsensical. It sounds as if it's our own conscience talking to us, and it reinforces the values that are most dear to us, but which can become obscured very easily by the goings on in life, during which we pick up all kinds of ideas for distraction, or ideas that lead to distraction, or that we just get bogged down and forget our context in life that we're just passing through, and so forth. So the Golden Monk is a series which we've been talking on because there's a sequence of teachings which the Golden Monk gave that can help us in the daily slog and to rise above, to get into a position called flow. So one of the points that he makes when he's teaching one of his students, Sanatan, is that a sign of spiritual development within one's mind is the resistance to time wasting. Does anybody have an idea what time wasting is? Some of you are smiling, so I'll take that as a yes. There's a way in which one might have an idea that I know what I'm supposed to be doing, but I'm doing something else that seems to be mindless. Of course, we know about mindfulness, but there's also mindless distraction that it can be a way of dealing with not facing the responsibility of trying to make progress. And there's a way in which that what it seems to be stress relieving actually creates more, because until I'm in that flow where I know I'm doing the right thing and I'm moving towards a worthy goal and I don't have any other distractions, that's where actually I find true peace of mind. Would you agree with me there? Let's have a discussion on that if you agree with the premise. In fact, in studying flow recently, I found that most people who have studied it extensively talk about how it exists everywhere. In every culture and in every discipline, those who are making progress say that there's a state that they have to come to in order to notice their progress, and that's the state of flow. What say you? Look, I think I got something on the chat. I'm fishing for responses here, and I think I got some. JM, let's see. What is there?
Yeah, for mindlessness, mindless activity, Bhaskar said spending time on OTT. And
you said what?
Spending time on OTT, just browsing through movies and videos.
What's OTT?
It's short for online platforms.
But online platforms is with a P. What's OT?
Over the top media service.
Over the top media service?
Yes.
Okay. I guess it's a kind of affliction, huh?
Yes.
Okay.
And then Mayank says some people call this same mindless activity as me time.
Okay. Oh, me time.
Me time.
And what does that mean, me time?
Mayank?
Yeah, like recently I've been hearing a lot of my colleagues say that when we get home, we are so tired and that we just need some me time to either just binge on some Netflix shows or just some time to just like be mindless, as you said, and just absorb in something, some kind of entertainment or um, eating a favorite dish, etc.
I see. Sure. Well, okay. That makes sense. In the Gita, Krishna talks about recreation, or what we call recreation, but there are different levels of recreation. Some of them are better at helping us recreate ourselves than perhaps others. And there is a way in which we can become attached to just pure distraction, which is a certain modality. Well, let's get centered for a minute, and we'll just take a moment to introspect. So let's try by sitting up a little straighter than we were a second ago, and try closing your eyes. And then bring your attention to your breath. And you'll notice that your breath has a flow to it. And when you connect to that flow, become more aware that your body is a biological mechanism. And just for now, let go of any thoughts about what you have to do or what you left behind, and just be in the moment. Watch your breath and keep bringing your mind back to the flow of your breath. And now bring your awareness to yourself. You're a conscious entity, and you can become conscious that you're conscious Feel positively that you exist. And stay absorbed in that. Consciousness is like light. And you can be aware of the light of your own consciousness. And now notice that when you come out of that awareness of your own consciousness, there's a chatter that goes on in your mind. And see if you can now objectify that chatter and be aware that the mind brings a whirlwind of thoughts, desires, anxieties. And they're all mixed up together and they swirl. Just see if you can notice it, but step back from it. Don't be carried away, just notice that it's there. When we grab onto some of those anxieties, various and varied desires, we may feel impelled, oh, I have to do this or that. But by just getting an inch away from them and noticing that they have their own form and they're not us, we are the conscious being, we can witness them, we can see how they're moving. And now see if you can distinguish between the chatter of your mind and your intellect, which is called the buddhi. Buddhi means intelligence. It's a discriminatory tool, comes standard in every human body. And it's like the adult in the room where when our mind says, hey, let's do this, and the intelligence says, it's not a good idea for my reputation, career, health, and then says, let's not do it. It's like the parent in the room who would prevent the child from grabbing onto a knife or some other implement that might be unsafe. And then let's experiment and see that you have the power to place your attention wherever you wish. So now move your full attention to your right index finger and just feel the existence of your index finger. And notice that you're the one directing your attention there. Keep it there and feel how your index finger is flowing with blood, takes up its own space. It's part of your body. It's there, but I'm barely ever aware of it until I actually decide to place my attention there. And we can, the power of our free will, with the power of our free will, we can decide to place our attention anywhere we wish. So now let's try a mantra. We can say together behind muted mics. It's a one-syllable mantra, Om, that synchronizes all of the energies and helps bring our mind to a peaceful state. It's Om, actually spelled A-U-M or O-M. And I'll say it 3 times. Try to make the vibration and just listen to it and let it reverberate in your solar plexus. Om. 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 Now just notice any effects from the vibration of the mantra. Be aware of all the inner workings, how your mind is producing ideas, your intelligence is sorting them out, and how you are the observer of all these functions going on, and how you have the power to decide where to point your attention at any second. You can change it. And bring your attention back to your breath. And then you can rub your palms together to create some friction, open your eyes, and come back into the Zoom room. Okay, JM, it looks like a few points came in during the last few minutes.
Yes, I'm just reading them now. Jose says, to me, flow should not take effort, but here flow means to do what you have to do, which takes effort. Could you elaborate?
Well, I can tell you in writing, it takes me effort to get to the space where I can be in flow. For instance, I have to make sure I'm in an environment where I'm not going to be distracted. And I also have to have some intention and mental strength to make the decision to place my attention on the page and say, now I'm going to write. And there is a sense of resistance. There's a way also in reading a book. Before I start, my mind might say, well, why don't you just fritter away your time doing something mindless rather than reading a book? It's too hard. Those who exercise know that there may be an impulse that, well, maybe just take the day off today rather than taking your walk. There's always some resistance that's there. And so the effort is in planning ahead, making a goal, and then learning how to get into that state of flow. And once we're there, there's a sense of not just accomplishment, but actually a peace of mind where there's no other distraction and we feel that we're fully absorbed. We're not being tortured by the various thoughts tapping us on the shoulder. If you've ever been in a situation where there's lots of people around you and they're all vying for your attention, tapping, please look over here. It's a torturous kind of situation. And that's the way our mind interacts with us oftentimes, to bring us, oh, look here, look over there. How about this? How about that? When we're in flow state, we can go beyond that.
There's one more point from Makan. Sure. Thus, he's saying that the father of flow research is the best moments in our lives are not the passive, receptive, relaxing times. The best moments usually occur if a person's body or mind is stretched to its limit in a voluntary effort to accomplish something difficult and worthwhile. I wouldn't attempt to read the name, I think, or the book. 1990.
Makanchor can pronounce it for us.
Yeah.
His name is Mihai Csikszentmihalyi. He was a flow psychologist, a flow researcher. His famous book is called Flow.
Thank you.
And he lists, I think, 8 characteristics of flow below. Complete concentration on the task, clarity of goals and reward in mind and immediate feedback, transformation of time, speeding up, slowing down. The experience is intrinsically rewarding, effortlessness and ease. There is a balance between challenge and skills. Action and awareness are merged, losing self-conscious rumination. there is a feeling of control over the task.
I like especially the mention of how it's intrinsically rewarding. We are, as conscious beings, full of, by nature, happiness. And when we're distracted by the mind and we're looking elsewhere, outside ourselves, there's a way in which we feel out of balance. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna mentions that a person who's practicing spiritually can come to this state of flow. And he says, prajahati. He uses the word prajahati, which means they're able to restrain their minds or themselves from chasing after all the various offerings of the mind. And then he says, atmanyevatmana tushta, that person is able to experience happiness in his or her own self, just being absorbed in consciousness. So we tried that exercise of feeling positively that we exist. We always have that to revert to. And those who practice meditation, yoga, bhakti, can come to that state of moving about the world, but staying in that sense of, I'm a conscious entity. I'm observing all the various aspects of my life, the various desires in my mind, and engaging with them judiciously, but not being overwhelmed by them. There's a state of anxiety that comes from feeling overwhelmed by the various thoughts, desires, options in the material world. And there's also a sense of boredom that comes from not being able to experience the satisfaction of absorption or flow by seeing one's own self or conscious nature. And so the Golden Monk taught that the perfection of life means to get to that state where we're able to be fully aware of the happiness that's already in ourselves. And then we have this enlightened engagement with the world. There's nothing in it for us, actually, in the world, in that state of flow, because we're already feeling satisfaction in ourselves. So we don't feel compelled that I have to get something else out of the world. I work out of a higher impetus, which is in dedication to service. JM, how about we look at a few slides? And thank you, Makanjor. That was very helpful to have that list. So the Golden Monk talks a lot about our existential situation. And we'll look at the next slide. Existential has to do with the fact that we exist. So how do we know we exist? Let's come back in the Zoom room for a minute. Charles, do you exist?
That's an interesting question.
Do you feel that you exist? Is it your sense generally that you exist?
When I'm being, I guess, mindful and present, well, let's say I can say this: during that experience you gave us out of meditation, I did feel as though I exist.
Okay.
Felt that that was real.
Can you prove that you exist? It's harder to say, right? Well, there are certain phenomena that prove themselves. And the fact that we are aware of our own existence, I feel that I exist, and that's why we started the meditation with feel positively that you exist, proves itself. We exist and we know we exist. It's a sense that we exist. Our existential situation is that we always exist. We're now basically contending with an external world, and even within our mind, situations where the phenomena come and go. And when I identify too closely with those, I have a fear, perhaps, that at some point I won't exist. So the Golden Monk starts us off on solid ground. And he says, no, you exist. You've always existed. Socrates talked about this. And there's a way in which we survive even the changes that go on in our lives. We change from having a baby's body, and then we have a youthful body, and then we have a body that's elderly. And then we get another body. And so the Golden Monk subscribes to the teachings that come from the wisdom literatures that describe how we are categorically different from the changes that are taking place. We're only observing them. And we can always become aware of our own existence and notice that we exist. And we can see the light of existence. When the sun comes up in the morning, there's not much more proof that needs to be offered. And actually, you look and you say, the sun's up. Like, who's going to argue with you? There it is. So the light of consciousness is like that. So this is one of the points that he makes, is become aware of who you are, what your existence is. And that is, he calls it chit kana. You're actually a particle of consciousness. And that particle of consciousness is always it always exists, always has exists. And you can become aware of your own awareness. Okay, JM, let's try the next slide.
Yeah, there are a couple of...
we got some heavy hitters coming in here. We got Jose and Wolf. Okay, go ahead.
Jose says, I know that I exist by contradiction. If I didn't exist, I couldn't decide where to put my attention.
Yeah, that's in the same vein as consciousness proves itself, the very fact that you're awareness. And so if you deny your consciousness, if you deny your existence, denial is also an act of consciousness. So you can't get away from it. It's a conscious choice to deny something also. What did Wolf write?
Wolf says, it looks like this human experiment wasn't thought through very well. The user manual is delivered 40, 50 years later as wisdom literature, and not everyone is able to follow either.
Well, ideally, we get it from the beginning, but whenever we get it, we can connect the dots. We find that people who are late to getting certain kinds of information, like anybody can say that, I should have had it sooner. But fortunately, because we're actually not our bodies, we're conscious beings, we're not that far away from self-realization at any point. And it is so commonsensical and available through direct perception that anyone at any time can come to that awareness. And also, sometimes when we come late to the game, we have a good portion of our lives to compare to what we're experiencing when we become more conscious. So this is one of the statements given in the Upanishads, and that is that when you have the opportunity to compare what it's like to be absorbed materially, that is to just be off in the mind and wherever it takes you, and to have forgotten about your conscious self. And when you become conscious, then you can see, what was I like before? What do I feel like now? And he said in that comparison, you can get a lot of strength and determination, because see the difference between the two. That was a little convoluted what I said, but it's accurate according to the ancient wisdom teachings.
Thank you.
You're welcome, Wolf. Okay, there's something about Descartes here from Jay Cully.
Yeah, Descartes, I think, says, I think, therefore I am. I think, but this ignores the obvious that without being there is no thinking. Therefore, it makes more sense to say I am, therefore I think, therefore I can know I am.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. That was very interesting. I think we'll change it from now on. It's all in the translation anyway. Okay, let's look at a few slides and see if they're thought-provoking and that they follow the thought process that the Golden Monk is passing down to us. So existential. Existence is the definition. One of the definitions is the fact or state of living or having objective reality. So this is very important because, as I'm stressing, we can be carried away by the currents of the mind and be absorbed in our life situation rather than our life, and not actually see that we're the observer. And this is a situation in which we become not so productive. Now, this is a point I made before, but I want to stress on it today in the context of finding your flow. The Golden Monk talked about our situation as conscious entities, or as I mentioned before, he called it in Sanskrit, chit kana, which means a particle of conscious energy. So we've already experimented at the beginning of the hour that we can place our awareness wherever we want. That's a miracle, actually, the miracle of free will. At any time, we can decide where we want to place it. And we can become aware of our own awareness. We become conscious that we're conscious, and so forth. But what are more of the characteristics of the individual particle of consciousness that each one of us is? And that is called tatasta. So sta means where you're situated, where you're standing, and tata means a marginal position. An example that's often given is the beach. The beach is sometimes wet and sometimes dry, according to the tide. And as marginal entities, we can either be absorbed in higher consciousness, or we can get swept away by the flow of the lower energies. So this is an important aspect of the Golden Monk's teachings, which he takes right from the Bhagavad Gita, which is 5,000 years old. And in the Bhagavad Gita, there's a paradigm explaining how there are higher energies and lower energies. So as we found, we can place our attention wherever we wish. And if I place my attention on the lower energies, then I start to take on the characteristics of the lower energies. If I place my attention on the higher energies, then my consciousness is lifted. I come to a higher level. And therefore, he stressed to the Golden Monk that we're marginal. So one of the ways I like to describe or define this point of tatasta, or our marginality, is that we are open to suggestion. Have you ever noticed, and by the way, let's look at the word subject. When it comes to the word suggestion, it comes from these two words, sub, from below, gerere, bring. So it brings you some information or something from below and introduces it to you. We'll come back in the Zoom room just for a second, and I want to talk about this phrase, open to suggestion. What are the ways in which any of you have ever noticed that you're open to suggestion? You were thinking one way, and then someone suggested something. They brought in another idea or concept, and then you changed your mind. Has anybody ever had that happen? And if so, what was it? Can you think of a situation? Anybody ever suggest anything to you, and then you said, oh, maybe I'll do that instead? Just give me one example. Yes.
There was a study that people did to students. So there was two group of students. One is a control, they're just a normal teacher or student. And the other group that the teacher had told them that they are very special, that they're very smart. And, that's a suggestion. And then in the end of the school year, they compare the two groups, that the one that got the suggestion or being labeled as a smart did better than the other group. But when they first got selected, they're actually about the same.
Yes, Yan Yan, thank you very much. And good to see you, by the way, or hear you. and see your name. It's been a while since I've we've interacted. That I heard a similar study where the teachers were told, we're going to give you all the geniuses because you're so special teachers. We're giving you the smartest kids, treat them with kid gloves. And they went out of their way. They extended themselves even more just by the power of suggestion. They were just randomly picked, the kids. They weren't necessarily higher IQ or anything like that. And the suggestion that they were changed the behavior of the teachers. Yes, thank you. That brought us a very scientific and good track, Yan Yan. As usual, your contributions are amazing. Okay, so this suggestion, Sundar, yes.
Oh, I was just relating to my experience this morning. I was just going off based on suggestions, and I think it happens all the time. I was focusing at my work, and one of my friends suggested to look at something else, and I just veered off to look at that. And I came back to the session, and it suddenly changed, to look at my own consciousness. So I guess we are all prone to suggestions every moment.
Yes, at every moment we're subjected to suggestions. At the San Francisco airport, I notice if, once I go through security, if I go in to get a bottle of water before I get on a plane, there's one shop there that I've stopped in several times in the United Terminal. And they, right after you make your transaction, then they say, would you like to give a donation for the USO? And I hear them, they say it to everybody. And then a percentage of people do it because they just said it. The vibration came out. And I also noticed there's a marketplace that I visit sometimes in India. It's called Loi Bazaar, Loi Bazaar. And it's like a shopping area. And there's some of the merchants there, they sell cloth. And so people come in to buy all kinds of cloth. They have shirts tailored and so forth. And then I noticed that the shopkeepers are very expert because somebody will go down there to pick up a couple of things. And then just before, they're about to finish, they'll say, you want sari? Sari means like these, really nice silk cloths. And then just by the sound vibration, I watch people that kind of do a double take. They're like, yeah, maybe I do. I should take it. And here, take this one. And so by suggestion also, that's what sales is. People just call up and suggest something, sometimes out of the blue, out cold calling, or somebody saying, why don't you buy this? And so, okay, yeah, I'll take it. Tatastha means, although we have our own willpower or we have a free will, we can place our attention wherever we want. We are open to suggestion. And suggestions pour in from our own minds. They come in from other people. And therefore, the Golden Monk said, set your own track. Decide ahead of time which direction you're going to go. And then be on that track so that you're not diverted by various suggestions. So he recommended that we have a strong idea about what our path is and how to walk on it so that we don't get waylaid. So that's called tatastha, or that's our nature, is to be vulnerable in that way. Okay, again, I'm open to suggestions here too. So if you have any suggestions about what we're talking about or any comments, you please go ahead and say it. It's very powerful when you speak up. Okay, so the next, yes, please, Sundar.
No, just one point I just want to reflect back, because I like your point about, set your track or, frame and plan your day so that you're not open to all the suggestions, but maybe some suggestions which is useful, but not all of them. So I remember the phrase, that you often quote, frame or be framed.
That's right.
Thank you for that.
I took that from Guy Kawasaki, one of the founders of Apple. And he wrote a book called Art of the Start. And in it, he talks about how we have to be clear about what we actually want to create in our lives. And he comes with this phrase that Sundar Prabhu has echoed. Thank you, Sundar, where he says, frame or be framed. And you'll notice that unless you frame what your life should be like, what you want it to be like, what your goal is, someone will come inevitably and frame it for you. They'll suggest, no, why don't you do it like this? Why don't you dress like this? Why don't you pursue this or that? And so we have the opportunity to frame our own lives. And if we don't, then someone will frame them for us. That's part of the power that we're subjected to of others suggesting things to us. Not that we are always closed down to suggestion. We're open to improvement, but we have to have a clear idea of what's a good idea or not based on which way we're going. Because if you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there. Alice in Wonderland. Would you like to see one more slide? If you would, please give me a thumbs up. Because if I can get a quorum, then I can move on. Okay, I have 1, 2, 3, 4. Thanks, Yan. Pankaj, thank you. Rajesh, Jesse, Carmen, Soumya, Raj. Okay, Wolf gave a heart. Way to go, Wolf. You know how to encourage people. Roseanne, thank you. Debbie, SG, Mansi. Okay, we got a quorum. Let's see another slide. One more slide. One idea can change your life, right? So find your flow. Why not? Find it. Try to get in the flow state. According to all the studies on flow, people who find their flow state make progress. The great athletic performances, musical performances, they take place when somebody finds their flow state. And there is such a realm. There is a way to find it and stay in it. So in Sanskrit, flow is called samadhi. If you say that word D, it's D-H-I, D. D means focus, what you're meditating on. So placing the mind on one point and being able to stay there, it's not so easy. So the mind's very fickle. And sama means complete. So in Patanjali Muni's teachings from thousands of years ago about yoga psychology, the goal is to get the mind to come to this point of samadhi, samadhi, samadhi. Samadhi means you're able to focus the mind in one place and keep it there and not move it from one place to the next. You're not dragged away by the mind. And that's a flow state in which you actually experience true happiness. When the mind is in a whirlpool and we're being pulled along with it, then it's a torturous situation going from one thing to the next. Have you ever been in a state of anxiety and it feels like a ceiling fan, you're looking up and it's going around and around? The mind's trying to solve a problem. Oh, what if they find out? Oh, what am I going to do now? How am I going to get it back? How am I going to get him or her back? The mind goes and goes and goes and goes and goes. So when one finds this flow or samadhi, then there's a way in which we can go beyond the torturous cycles of the mind that are always there. There's a realm in which the mind is constantly chattering and moving, and the eye of the storm is in this samadhi state. So the Bhagavad Gita points out that the mind is subjected to 3 modalities. Sattva is the highest, although it's in the middle there. We'll see from that chart, it's the highest modality in the world, in the material world. And when we're in sattva, when the mind is in sattva, there's natural happiness and we feel illuminated. We can see things as they are. We see things clearly, able to make good decisions and so forth. The mind is happy. When we're in rajas, we're influenced by rajas energy. then we're active. There's unlimited desires and longings. Unlimited means doesn't matter how many times you fulfill a desire, it's never quite right and you need more. Has anybody ever experienced that? You longed for something and then you got it and then it wasn't enough? Please say yes, because otherwise I'm going to feel alone here. Yes, okay. That's rajas. It's actually a definable state of consciousness. We're influenced by a particular modality that's inherent in the material nature. And tamas, the lowest of energies, dull mind, or we feel they're helpless. There's also a sense of madness, indolence, which means, although, we just can't get anything done. We can't move. So sattva, rajas, tamas are the three determining factors of the mind. And there are ways to culture sattva to come to a higher level of a higher quality of mind so that we're clear. So to start the flow of sattva is an important stepping off point for spiritual practice. In fact, many of the literatures say, unless your mind comes to sattva through your lifestyle adjustments, then it's almost impossible to meditate, to come into the state of samadhi or to be fixed in mind and feel the happiness that comes from within. We hear this, it's a cliche to say, oh, happiness comes from within, but how do you actually get it? Well, there's a way to do that. So I've summarized some of the major points that come from these ancient literatures that teach us how to get to sattva. One of them is to keep the transcendental vibration going. So transcendental vibration means there's sound vibration that's not connected to the elements of the material world. We could say it's anti-material. And that includes, there are certain mantras that are like seeds, that are spiritual. It's a spiritual sound vibration. And when you hear it and when you repeat it and you stay in that vibration, or there are certain kinds of literatures that are non-material, and when you hear from those and you keep that vibration going, and by keeping it going, I mean, the more it's going, the more you'll notice the transformation of your mind coming to a higher level called sattva. And some of the ancient teachers say, well, it's not reasonable for people who have demands on their lives and things they have to do and so forth to say, stay in it 24 hours a day, because that would be very difficult, but at least do it once a day. Okay, there's a question there, JM.
Yeah, the question is, can one experience flow when meditating? Is that something someone who has been practicing it for a while can experience?
Yes, and even if you haven't practiced for a while, you can experience it, because we are spiritual beings, and when we become aware of our own consciousness, we can be fascinated by it. And even if you experience flow for 2 seconds, even 1 second, you're going to be different when you come out of it. And that's why I start these sessions with just a couple of minutes of introspection, because it doesn't mean you have to repair to the Himalaya and go into a cave. It doesn't mean more than having the time to actually observe who you are and notice your own consciousness. We are inherently blissful and full of knowledge, but when I'm distracted and my mind goes elsewhere, then I perceive of myself as being my life situation rather than my life itself. And I become overwhelmed by it. So yes, you can experience flow when meditating. And I'll go into some of the best ways to meditate in a second. So keeping the transcendental vibration going, every realm in the universe is defined by the vibration, the transcendental vibration that's there. When you go into the supermarket, why do you think they play a special kind of music? Because that is the expectation that by playing music, you'll relax. And, the sound vibration that's within a particular realm in the atmosphere is what determines the kind of consciousness. So we have to self-engineer the vibration that's going on in our lives. And there's a way to do that. The next that the Golden Monk suggested, he talks a lot about how we are a product of our association. In fact, in one of his sayings, he points out that the root cause of our consciousness and our habits is our association. And you might notice this. Have you ever noticed that after you're around a certain type of person in your life for a day or two, or even just a few minutes, it rubs off on you? To use the vernacular, it sort of rubs off on you. I mean, I have friends that I spend time with, and I always notice, and other people do too. Like if I come back from a trip and I traveled with a particular person, I'll come back and people say, "Oh, you're acting just like such and such." You're also same eating habits too. So the Golden Monk said, if you want to know how to improve your consciousness, find high-minded people and associate with them. And it's kind of miraculous. It's like almost by just proximity. If you're able to stay in the association of people like that, or at least visit people like that on a regular basis, then you'll also pick up the qualities that they have. And now there's, yes, Yan Yang.
I just want to say sometimes these conscious effort, even though we wanted to be in the flow, like someone had shared before, that to get to that flow is difficult, and it's easier to be mindless than to be mindful. So that's why sometimes when we are struggling, if we have a fellow traveler that is in the same frequency or sometimes a higher, then we look up to them, and it's easier for us to say, hey, keep focused and keep the eyes on the prize. But if we have other people that are, whether conscious or unconscious, they're doing things that are easy, habitual, and if we see it day to day, it kind of like that's the suggestion or the noise that influences us. My personal story was my ex. He was more laid back. He doesn't want to try too hard. That's just how he does everything. Not good or bad, but that's just how he is. So when I was with him, I always wanted to do things. I'm not saying I'm better, but it's like if I'm idle, then I have all this extra energy. I don't know where to go. So we fight a lot, which is not good. But finally, we let go. We went our separate ways, and that is so much better.
So if I understand you correctly, you're talking about how when there's somebody whose qualities you don't want to imbibe, then you sort of disengage your mind in a way.
It's kind of like if he wants to be around me together, we could go some different direction. But if he's resisting that change and he doesn't want to go there, so instead of trying to fight with him all the time, then okay, I surrender, I let you go, and I'll go my separate ways and find other people that want to do similar things. Then we're both happy now.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. Thank you, Yan Yan. That was helpful.
Wason has his hand up.
Wason, yes, please. I think you're on mute.
Yeah, I was trying to unmute myself. I'm sorry about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I actually typed my question because I wasn't sure if you have enough time for me to say it verbally. So the question is, we're talking about the second point, which is association with the high-minded people. Doesn't that have the chances of having the high-minded people become infected with the low-minded people mentality? I mean, it's becoming contagious.
Yeah, because we're open to suggestion. But sometimes when I say high-minded, of course, there's a lot in the definition there. Oftentimes high-minded, the kind of high-minded person that the Golden Monk talks about is someone who's mature in consciousness and in spiritual practice, and is, of course, careful about how he or she moves about in the world, because no one is beyond infection. And therefore, just like I have a friend who's a doctor, and throughout the pandemic, he's been the head of a COVID ward. And he was telling me the lengths to which he went to make sure they didn't get infected, including wearing goggles, because the infection can come in through the eyes, and also a mask, and everything else that he was able to do through distancing. But he's been very effective and not been infected. So yes, a high-minded person oftentimes is careful. I mean, that's one of the qualities of being high-minded, is being careful about how one moves about the world and how one associates. It doesn't mean, however, that because we're open to suggestion, we can't move about the world, or we should be antisocial, nor can we do that. We have obligatory relationships that we have to engage in. It means that we should be as selective as possible, and also not as open when we find a lower vibration. We can be affable and socially available, but we don't keep our hearts wide open in that case. And also the people who are trying to help, for instance, those who go out into situations like my friend Matthew, who is a paramedic for 20 years. The first thing they taught him in paramedic school was that a dead paramedic can't help anybody. So the first job of the paramedic is to not get killed. When you go onto the scene where there's a, gaseous mixture in the air, or somebody has a knife, or, all these types of things, you have to be careful first so you can actually do your job and help. I hope that helped. Okay, and then here's a few lifestyle points. The 21-day spiritual fitness challenge, we made an app, and it's part of the success sadhana genre. And here's a look at a few of the points for success sadhana. Do we have that available, JM? Now you're on mute. Seems to be going around.
Sorry, I was just saying that I'll quickly bring it up.
Yes. So if we have a plan, we make a plan and say, I'll implement some of these points that the Golden Monk brought up in body, mind, and spirit, because it's a holistic process. Then you just start noticing, even if you apply it a little bit every day, just a few minutes, start noticing that the mind goes on a different track, and you can start cultivating sattva. And from sattva, there's a natural sense of attraction for flow and being in a absorbed state spiritually. And so the first thing is in the body. And so in body, the yoga literatures describe that you have to keep yourself healthy and be careful what you eat. You are what you eat. And also in mind, when you come to from the position of mind, you have to be careful not to ingest all types of information that will clutter your mind. So be very deliberate about going into information areas. Let's just go quickly through. I'll talk about this in another time, but in body, regulating sleep is helpful. Go to sleep early, get up early is the greatest admonition. Eat healthy, walk daily, or do something to keep the blood flowing and so keep the body flowing. It has natural healing powers, but we have to help it out a little bit. Then comes the mind. How to get the sattva in the mind. Wake up to an affirmation. There's a few affirmations listed here. For instance, today I focus on the present moment, which is the only point of power and the only time I have. I'm an architect of my life. I practice with focus, attention, and sincerity to develop good habits. We've been doing on another class, a whole series on affirmations, but wake up affirming the direction you're going. The next one is start the day with a map. In fact, my practice is always wake up with a prayer and a plan. That's the first two things I need when I get up in the morning, a prayer and a plan. And another very practical point now is manage screen time. If you have a television, cut the cord. Well, you don't have to, but it's a highly effective way to get extra hours in your life and to bring your mind to a higher level. Just make sure it's not plugged in when you cut it. And then be careful, because you carry a device around, your mind can go down rabbit holes. So plan ahead. If you're going to go on and look at social media, know why you're going there and regulate your time. I highly recommend getting one of these. Of course, you can do it with any device, but this is an external device. All it does is count down. So I always have it at hand. And when I'm starting a task, I say, okay, you've got 10 minutes, whether it's whatever I'm doing, 10 minutes, 40 minutes. And I say, okay, I'm going to, there, it just reacted to going to 0. And it tells me, okay, their time's up. So the next comes to body, mind, and spirit, which means do mantra meditation. Do that every day, practice it, and you'll start to notice the transformation of your mind to a higher level. And perform one act of selfless service. Just try it. If you live with somebody, go out of your way, do some selfless service, see how you feel. By giving, you grow. And keep a gratitude journal. It's very helpful to remember the things that you already have and stay in that flow of gratitude. And these are body, mind, and spirit, some suggestions that you can follow on the app through which you can start to develop some sattva habits. And it's a precursor to coming step by step to a point of flow and samadhi. Well, I took us over time. I thank JM for keeping everything going. And thank you, everybody, for joining and giving your valuable time. You know, he just came back from India last week, if I remember correctly. Maybe it was the week before. And I did verify by going my route through the Himalayas that the yogis high on the mountain peaks who live in caves come out at intervals to find fruits and roots. And when they see one another on the high mountain pass, they call out into the valleys.
Haribol.
That's correct, Chandu.
Haribol.
Haribol means keep the transcendental vibration going. Haribol, Haribol.
Haribol.
Thank you, everybody. Haribol.